let's go over what's new. So I've been making a lot of edits without recording, just because I think I go a little bit faster when I'm doing that. Okay, so in our initialization of GlobalData, we have this new object called event bits, and this is for the keyboard events. We're going to have a bit flags variable, actually two of them, one named event type and the other named subtype, and they can have different bits set to tell us, what kind of event they're I'm not verbalizing this very well. So this is just an invalid event, so I usually do that for anything that is set to 0. I thought since I had enough room that I might as well make these events not overlap, even though the mouse events and the keyboard events can... sorry, not the mouse events and the keyboard events, but the subtype events and the main type events, technically they could have overlapping numbers, but if we have enough space to not have them overlap, that would be a safer choice, just in case we do something stupid. We're more likely to catch the problem if we're not reusing the same numbers. So key up or down, we have click, we have key down, we have key up, mouse down, mouse up, mouse move, etc. All these events. Unlike other objects, we're actually going to freeze this object instead of just seal this object. So this is effectively an enumeration. And then we take this enumeration that we've created, and notice that we are in the initialization of GlobalData. So we go right down here and we add a new entry into the GlobalData object that is returned by the initialize GlobalData function. Okay, so I put breakpoints next to all the points that I've changed that I want to go over. Inside our global classes container, we've created a new entry called editor all. And editor all is our master editor. It always receives keyboard input no matter what, and then the master editor will decide whether or not it wants to pass the messages down to other editors. So we're going to have a chain of editors using a messenger pattern. Actually, not quite a messenger pattern, but similar. We're not gonna automatically let every single editor have a chance to get the message, but the main editor, editor all, is always going to get the message, and then it will decide if it wants to route the message to one of the other editors. And which editor will get the message will depend on what the editor mode enum is set to, right? So we'll have a variable that just tells us which editor is currently in control. So we want the master editor to be relatively benevolent, meaning that we don't really want it to do too much besides just direct traffic to the current editor that has focus. So with that, let's keep going. So is there anything new in here? If there's not a bookmark by it, there shouldn't be anything new. Unless I missed something, which, I could have. So we're just gonna go and keep on scrolling, because, oh my, this is getting out of control. But, I am structuring this, with the intent to actually make a robust code base. So, it's getting out of control, but not really in a bad way. I have been thinking about, what I'm trying to do and how I want to do it. So it's not and it's pretty well organized as well. Okay, that makes sense. So I don't know if these are in the right place. Yeah, this is like a class, so I need to do a little bit more organization. So we have main down here, and then I've been dumping like helper things and other things down here. Uniform helpers kind of got its own category, whereas other things get put in like yeah, this loop table tick function is kind of just hanging out here. Yeah, this is the main loop table tick function. So this is our main loop, basically. Right, and it's going to basically use this struct to figure out, what needs to be called every single tick. So kind of a procedural design there. Okay, so here's the native window code for handling the native window code. But you're going to notice there's not really much graphics logic, because you would be like, well, why is it called native window if it doesn't handle graphics? And that is because in C code or anything substantially low level, the window is most likely also in charge of keyboard and mouse input. And I want to keep that association just because I am going to move this code base over to C. So let's go down, because I know I've changed a lot of things here. So first thing you'll notice is these event listeners for key up and key down. Now, instead of routing to native keyboard event handler, we're going to route to native keyboard event handler up and native keyboard handler event down. So up and down here. The reason for that is we need to set the substate on the events. And, it seems kind of hackish the way I did it. I'm not completely satisfied with it, but it'll do for now, right? So within here, we are going to set the bits for the key up event, but then we're also going to negate the key down event bit, right? So that we're going to flip all those bits, and then we're going to bitwise AND it, effectively unsetting this bit. So set the key up bit, unset the key down bit, and then we're also going to use these variables as well. So instead of packing all that data into an array of bit flags, we also have key up and key down as variables within the global event. Now, there's some reason for this duplication of data, specifically that the bits that we're using to hold the subtype and the main type of the event, those are kind of used to make the struct kind of like a union, where we determine what data is valid inside the struct by looking at the bit flags set in the subtype and the main type. And the main type is called EVE underscore TYP. And so if let's say if none of the keyboard event flags are set in the type flags, then you want to disregard any variables like key up and key down, right? We don't care what they say. It doesn't matter. Just completely disregard them, because if the bit mask doesn't say that it's one of those events, then it's just basically garbage data. And the reason for that is we're just going to try to reuse the same global event object everywhere, and we're only going to have one instance of that global event object. So if a click event and a keyboard down event both get fired at the same time, we want to set those bit flags so that it is interpreted as both types simultaneously at the same time. That might be kind of weird if you're not used to doing any like C code. Maybe you're not, because you're looking at somebody doing JavaScript right now. So yeah, that is kind of weird, but I'm trying to do things that won't abuse the garbage collector and that will translate nicely over to C code. So as far as our keyboard event handler down, same deal, except we're going to do everything inverted. So our key down bit, we're going to set that, and then our key up bit, we're going to unset that by inverting all the bits and then doing, oh, and I just found a bug because that's not, there's no bitwise and there, and it, yeah, that just, let me look for and equals, is that the only place where and equals is showing up? Okay, yeah, that's the only place where and equals is showing up. I just wanted to make sure before I, because I thought I had written it twice, but I guess I hadn't. So what we're going to do is we're going to put it, and equals, right? And then instead of a 0 there, and then we're going to get rid of this. And it looks like we have a lot of just horrible syntax. I'm surprised that even ran. Okay, so let's try to get that. Let's try to get everything lined up exactly the same, just so that for when we're looking at it. And I guess if we want to be like, here, let's do that. Let's do that. So we got that negation. Let's have that negation kind of more noticeable, like just kind of floating there, so you can kind of see it. Okay, so. Alright, so just checking to make sure that these values are the opposite. And we are in key down, so we're going to set the key down bit. So I try not to use these compound bitwise operators just because they look really weird. But in this case, like, I couldn't really justify doing it any other way, just because, I don't know, sometimes this seemed like the least confusing way for me to write it, so that's the way I wrote it. So setting the key down bit and then unsetting the key up bit. Let's see, do we make any more mistakes anywhere? Well, we're looking through this. I don't think so. So key up and key down, the individual variables, and key up and key down. The reason why I'm going to unset well, I'm not just going to do this cumulatively, and why I'm unsetting is because you can't simultaneously have your key up and down at the same time. That doesn't really make sense. Now, there could be some problems with this implementation, right? Having one event object, for example, when somebody is holding with multiple keys at the same time, yeah, that might be a problem. So I might have to rethink what I'm doing here, or have some type of support for multiple keys. I could actually have, I might want to have some type of, key map. So rather than just key up, key down, I might want like a bit field for which keys are currently pressed or something of that nature. Because I'm thinking, what's going to happen when you have two keys pressed at the same time, and it is valid for those two keys to be pressed at the same time. I don't have to worry about that right now, because that's more of like a gameplay mechanic thing, and as long as we're still working on the rendering engine aspects of this code, we don't really have to consider that. But I should keep that in the back of my head, because I think I've dug myself into a slight hole, but you know what, having something substantial to work off of and work with, is a good thing, I guess. I mean, I need this, so let's try to keep in the back of our mind that multiple key press thing and do what we can. Or we might want to just add the multiple key presses as some type of extension when we realize that that's what we need, right? So we could actually maybe we could probably keep this event as simple as it is and keep this one global event object here, and then maybe we have some type of way to create another type of compound keyboard event that is specifically for gameplay rather than for using the editor. I don't know. There's a lot of ways we could do this. Right now, let's not try to make it any more complicated than it already is, because I think it's already too complicated, and if we try to support multiple keys right now, that's just going to make this even more complicated, and we really need to stick to the whole idea of keep it simple, stupid, because even if you try to keep it simple, it's still going to get complicated. So let's not let this get out of hand. We just need rudimentary keyboard input so we can do what we need to do for the editor, and then once we have the full-fledged editor up and we have like gameplay, then we will revisit this. But this could be like something far in the future, like months from now, because the editor and the rendering engine, that's going to take a long time. Okay, so the native keyboard event handler. Now it's this is kind of ugly because the initial idea was to have the signature just take the native event and not my custom event. But now that this code is no longer directly called by the event handlers, it can have more of a custom signature, so I was allowed to edit that without repercussion. The idea was I didn't feel comfortable about just grabbing it into the global state here when there's obviously a logical funnel from these keyboard event handlers down and keyboard event handlers up, and they're already grabbing from the global state to get the global event, so I didn't see any reason to have it grab in there again when it can just pipe it down through this call with the native event. So right here and here. So you see how we take the native event and global event and call the keyboard event handler, and then same thing with our KeyDown event, same exact thing, native event, global event, we're going to pass that on down. So within the native keyboard event handler, we have some changes. So we don't want to, and right, all capitals, we do not want to remove any previously set flags, because remember, we're doing this as, we're using the global event as a sort of union object. So that means that, well, it's not just being used as a union object, because a union only has one valid state at any given time, right, because the bits are being shared, and it's not really being shared that way. It's union-like, I guess, right? It's union in the sense that the flags will tell us what parts of the struct are valid and usable, right? And so the event object, if it has no flags set, it's a completely invalid object, and we can't use any of it. And then maybe, one flag is set, so there's maybe just the keyboard flags are set, so only the keyboard data is valid. Maybe just the mouse flag is set, so the mouse data is valid. Or maybe both the mouse and keyboard flags are set, so like all of the data is valid. So we want to make sure that this right here is cumulative. So rather than using a or equals, because I just don't like the look of those operators, we're just going to take the global event type, which is the main type, and we're going to take it and we're going to OR it. So a bitwise OR, right? So a bitwise OR is going to be additive. It's going to add things on, and we're going to OR it with the global data event bits event type key. So this is flagging the keyboard data as valid, right? Because now that we're in the keyboard event handler, we want to set what key we have and make sure that when it gets down to any editors or handlers that are going to look at this event data, we want to make sure that it knows that data is valid. Eventually, when all of the editors and handlers have gotten a chance to look at the event data, then we wipe the global event object so that it can go through another event cycle in the code. Okay, so let's scroll down here. So I think we got the same thing. Yeah, so native event click handler. So right here with all these bookmarks, these are the additions. So it's the same deal. So the main type is mouse and the subtype is click. So we just want to support clicking for now. We don't want to worry about mouse up and mouse down. We don't want to get that granular because this is already complicated enough, as you can kind of see. But let's check this out. So the event type, the main event type, is we're going to add the just the mouse event type here, and then the subtype, is the click type, So it's a mouse event, and to be more specific, using a subtype, it is a click type, and we're going to use those bitwise ORs to add this subtype click bit and this event type mouse bit to their respective flag containers. I just want to check up here because I noticed we got 2 here in this section, and I know we have a very similar section here. Okay, so keyboard. So I see we have not set a subtype, and I think that might just be because the native keyboard event handler. Now I feel like I may have decided that there was going to be a key up and key down event, so I think I should really check this out, make sure I haven't missed something here. So let's see, we have, for our main types, we have the keyboard and mouse, and then key up, down, and click, and then we have key down and key up. Okay, so it looks like we should probably always set this one, because that, but this might not be very useful. I think that's for, that's a little bit, so I might just want to put this here, because key up or down, I mean, well, this is keyboard, so I mean, I guess I'm trying to make this kind of like the same idea as click. Now, if that were to be used in that kind of fashion, then this would only be flagged when we had a key up event, Because in order to get a key click, if we want to call it that, So this is a mouse click, and this would be like a key click. That would occur when the key is released. And then we got key down and key up. So let's check out, see if this is used anywhere. I'm pretty sure it is. It's yeah. So we're erasing the bit, but we're not. But I don't think we're. Oh, okay, yeah. So the subtype. That's right. So, my bad. So it's kind of convoluted, and I kind of went over why I didn't like it this way. But the subtypes need to be set in the more narrow event handlers, the keyboard event handler up or the keyboard event handler down. That's why I'm seeing some asymmetry in these blocks of code, because only the main event type is going to be set here. So obviously some of those event bits, not all of them are being used, but I'm just trying to flesh out the thought of how it would work. Okay, let's keep on going. So most of this looks pretty good. I've already tested it out, and it seems to be working all right. So in our poll events click and poll events key press or release, we commented out these logs, and instead we're going to go globalclasses.editorAll, which is our main editor that is always active and decides where to route messages to other editors, .readEvent, and then the global event. And the reason why we have this readEvent function is because I want to isolate the event driven logic within this program. And I want to isolate it so that I don't have to deal with it anymore. Because I don't really want to use an event-driven model, though JavaScript is very event-driven. So I want to make sure that code is separate from other code. And the way I'm going to kind of merge event-driven code with more like event loop type code, where event loop doesn't quite, no, it doesn't sound quite right. So I want more of a like procedural game loop kind of thing, where you can pull events rather than just events being able to happen at any time. Like you have to wait for them. Not very good at verbalizing this. But basically, I don't want the editor to ever be listening for events, right? This is where the event-driven model ends, and we tried and we've isolated it. So instead of using an event-driven model, we're going to have like this read event function, which sounds event-driven, doesn't it? Except for the fact that this editor all object, we're never going to attach event listeners to it in any way, and it's never going to try to listen for event broadcasts, right? It's going to very specifically only read an event if read event is invoked on it. And there's not going to be like a broadcast model. So I'm just, I feel like it's a bad explanation. But the idea is that event-driven code, I don't know, I think it's kind of complicated to implement in C code, or maybe I'm just not a good enough C coder, I don't know. But I don't really like event-driven code, especially if it's gonna end up in C. So instead of using event listeners, we're going to have these like read event functions, which I think will control the flow a little bit better. We don't want to do I don't want to do things asynchronously, and I don't want to do things multi-threaded. So no concurrency, no parallelism, no multi-threading, right? They all have slightly different definitions, but the idea is that I want everything very linear. Now, yeah, that could tie your game logic to the rendering frame rate, but you know what? I'd say Doom Eternal is a pretty good game, and all their logic is tied to their frame rate. You try to do multi-threading, and just a whole bunch of weird things happen with synchronization. So you're just asking for a lot of trouble. It would really be better to try to keep everything as simple as possible, and you can try to add all those fancy features after you have something that works. Okay, so our editor all, and actually I gotta stop recording because this is almost 30 minutes.